GM lads, we're quite excited to share the conversation we had with Kyle Samani. I thought it was one of the really good ones. I know he's a very outspoken person, but we actually had a productive chat and a very good debate, which is what you want. I think, guys, we figured out where the base assumptions lie that we differ on, and that's why we reached different conclusions than Kyle. So it was very productive in that sense. So enjoy the chat, and if you guys want to stick around at the end, we'll kind of give you a debrief on what we thought those were.
Although our guest this week is a managing partner of a registered investment advisor, nothing in this podcast should be considered an offer of Multicoin's investment advisory services or should otherwise be confused for investment, tax, legal, or other financial advice. Enjoy the show.
GM, everybody, welcome to episode 63 of Steady Lads. We have a special guest, Kyle Samani, with us. Hey, Kyle.
Hey, guys. Long time listener, first time caller. Good to be on the show.
That's good. Kyle was saying backstage, he's getting through hours and hours of footage from Breakpoint. So you're a studious guy, Kyle. You just take in a lot of information, it sounds like.
I consume a lot of content. When I'm on the bike, I go for walks, and my headphones are in, and I'm listening to stuff. You never know where you're going to find that little bit of information that's going to spark an idea. So I'm always listening and trying to figure stuff out.
Awesome. Well, we're very excited to get some of your insights that you've gleaned over the years. I know you've been around for a long time. Justin, Taiki, good to have you guys as well. So we're going to try to do a bit of an evergreen episode, not so much immediate market commentary. I think we want to zoom out a little bit and look at some of the big topics happening in the space. And hopefully we'll have better outcome than, I think you went on Bankless and then just destroyed Ethereum and then for weeks. So I think we'll try to do something different than that.
Okay.
Justin, you want to kick off maybe?
Yeah, I'll kick off. So first of all, Kyle, I was at Token as well. Heard a bunch of your talks, had a great experience. So on the show, unfortunately, I'm known as the ETH Maxi, even though that's really not true. There's a lot of stuff I'm disgruntled with that I think we would probably agree on. And I have to say, a lot of your arguments have been very convincing, especially what's come out of Token. But maybe you could just start by giving a very quick recap. You gave a main stage talk at Token on why SOL will flip ETH. Do you want to just give a TLDR there? And we also have the deck if you want to page through it and talk to any specific points.
Yeah, happy to. And we're recording this roughly 1 week after Token and Breakpoint. My talk from Token, the YouTube videos, I'm told, will go live imminently. So hopefully it's out there by the time this episode drops. But anyways, basically my presentation had a few major components. The first part of my presentation, I talk about the history of Ethereum. Because I think if we're going to make claims about the status quo, I think some historical context is important. And so the kind of first thing I flag is just Ethereum's age. We tend to forget this, but Ethereum is 9 years old. Launched July 2015 to be specific. It's okay, well, what's happened in 9 years is kind of the next obvious question. And in the presentation, I basically suggest there are three major things that have happened. Obviously, lots of small things, but three majors. And the three majors are, one, the commitment to the roll-up centric roadmap, which was, I'd say, enshrined or formalized in October of 2020 with a blog post that Vitalik did. Two was the transition from proof of work to proof of stake, which was September of 2022. And three, I think the third major thing that happened was not a thing that was done or coordinated by the EF, but rather was a function of the market and the ecosystem evolving, which was basically figuring out, hey, what is Ethereum useful for? And in my opinion, the answer to that unequivocally is DeFi. And I would say that we as a market got the answer to the question, what is Ethereum useful for, in the summer of 2020, when kind of DeFi summer kicked off. That third one is obviously more subjective. The first two are very objective statements. You could squabble over the third one, but I'd say most reasonable people in the space would agree with that assessment. And so I gotta say, look, this thing's 9 years old. Those are the three most important things that have happened. And then let's put those things into some context. And a few things stand out. One, and most obviously, is just how slow it's all been. The network launched July 2015, and the decision to commit to the roll-up centric roadmap was October of 2020. So it took more than 5 years to commit to a plan. And it's not that like they didn't know that they needed to figure out a scaling plan. Vitalik and many others were on record, and to go dig into the ETH research forums from back in 2014, 2015. It was very clear what they all knew, like we need to figure out how to scale. And they knew that the V1 was not going to scale. And they were very transparent about that.
What happened with the, do you like follow the whole sharding thing? Because that kind of disappeared at some point.
Correct. And I'm not here to say they should have done sharding or not. Like, A, I'm not an engineer, but like B, I don't care what decision they made. That's not the criticism. Criticism is you knew you needed to figure out a plan in July 2015, and actually even before that, but we'll just say T0 is July 2015. And it took you 5 years to commit to a plan. And that to me is insane. Like, you knew you had this problem and it took you 5 years to commit to it.
So is your pushback, it's just not that complex of a research problem? Like you should have committed to something in like, let's say several months over 5 years. Like the research wasn't that complex. They could have got it done quicker with maybe a more centralized organization with more leadership.
I don't know if it's about like the organization. I mean, look, the EF isn't centralized, and specifically in the context of setting the roadmap, it's a very centralized entity. There's like, if you want to be generous, you can say 25 cooks in the kitchen. If you want to be less generous, you can say it's 5. And like, there's rooms of gray between those on who you count and how much influence each person has. It doesn't really matter. It's a very limited number of people who are actually setting the roadmap technically. So that's not the problem, that like they should have been more centralized. And in fact, Solana specifically is the counterpoint, because while Ethereum was like, we need to do all this research to figure out ZK and sharding and rollup and like all of these things. So Anatoly came in here, and his defining motto has been, I want to solve no computer science problems. I'm only going to take known methodologies in computer science and distributed systems, and I'm just going to apply them to a blockchain. And even if you look at like, probably the most important thing that they figured out early on as it pertains to proof of stake was the nothing at stake problem. And Vitalik wrote the canonical blog post on this, and they called it Slasher. This is like a 2015 blog post, maybe 2016, very early. And he basically, like, the criticism of proof of stake was, how do you deal with the nothing at stake problem? And Vitalik and Vlad proposed the solution, which the Ethereum ended up implementing. But the irony is that actually Solana has been live for 4 years today without any slashing, and it still works. And so like, even like the foundational thing that like we needed to figure out to make proof of stake work turned out to be optional.
But Kyle, I mean, just to push back a little bit, don't you think that like you look at Litecoin, you look at Bitcoin, obviously like Bitcoin is so slow even to add like concatenations or doing anything. And Litecoin, they're just doing Wimbles and all kinds of stuff. And it's partly because of the gravity of, the risking of breaking change to what is considered to be like just a very, very high value settlement layer, not really something that you can, play around with. And, Solana's had all kinds of downtime last cycle, especially, I remember. And that's totally fine, right? Because it's more experimental. It's trying to catch up and diversify like the approach. Do you fault Ethereum for taking like this kind of more European path?
No, it's unacceptable because no. Because look, I think Bitcoin is nonsense. But like, if you accept the digital gold thing and say it's digital gold, then it can't change. Like, fine, like it needs to be extra conservative. Okay, I don't subscribe to that theory of the world, but I understand if you do, why Bitcoin's development lack of velocity is warranted. But that's not what Ethereum is. From the get-go, Ethereum said very clearly, we must transition to proof of stake. They said very clearly, we must figure out a scaling plan. And those two things were promised and like obvious to do from day one. And so saying, well, therefore we should be slow. It's like, well, no, like you've told us you need to fix the fucking problems that you have.
So do you have a sense of why where the slowness is coming from? Like, is it from a lack of effort, a lack of coordination, a lack of vision? Like, what's the reason for that in your mind?
Oh, it's just no sense of urgency. Yeah, it's wartime versus peacetime. You don't sense a threat. Like, why do you care to move fast? Moving fast is hard. Moving fast requires pissing people off. Moving fast requires firing people who are like not performing. Like, moving fast is intrinsically uncomfortable.
I wanted to ask you this, a follow-up question to this. My biggest gripe with the Ethereum roadmap that I've been like pretty public about for a while now is that it's sort of like a capitulation to the tech gods that we can't actually figure out how to do the most optimal thing, which obviously everyone agrees would be one chain. So we're going to like basically create something that's not optimal because we're capitulating on being able to build the proper tech. Do you agree with that sentiment at all, or no?
No, I don't. I don't think that's what's driving the EF. The question of what's driving the EF is, I believe, what I would call an incorrect set of values, and like I'm intentionally being polarizing with that use of language, because I believe you should optimize for the user experience above other like these systems are multivariable or multidimensional, and you can optimize for different variables. And I believe the variable you should optimize for is user experience. And that means you're going to sacrifice on other dimensions for other variables. And like, that's fine.
Decentralization. Yeah.
Actually, that's the both incorrect and least important variable. Because in practice today, as a real world user experiences Solana, it is more decentralized because real world users are using L2s. So like, yeah, you can say the base layer is decentralized. Okay, sure. But like, that's not the lived experience of what normal humans are using. So it's like, well, what have you accomplished? You can talk about this abstract thing that lives underneath. It doesn't matter. That's not what the people are using.
Do you feel like that's why, Vitalik is saying that for next year, he's not even going to mention an L2 if it's not at least stage 1, with his stages. So he's maybe feeling what you're feeling.
I want to finish my core point, which is I believe the EF has been optimizing for solo stakers or at-home stakers where their number one objective is not user experience of users of the chain. Their number one objective are people who want to validate the chain at home and ensuring they can do so.
Hobbyists.
Those are two different stakeholder groups, and they have different technical requirements, and there are fundamental trade-offs to those two things. Like Solana is very clear. The North Star is decentralized NASDAQ, and that means you're not going to run this on shitty hardware, on shitty bandwidth. But that means that there are today roughly 3,000 nodes in the world that are synchronizing all of the financial market information that is pertaining on the Solana blockchain in real time and processing all those state updates and stuff. But there are 3,000 nodes that are synchronizing that information. And I want to contrast that against like the most idealized L2, like let's say whether it's Mega ETH or Arbitrum or the Optimus, doesn't matter. But like all of those systems, at least in their current discourse, this could change, but as of today, their current discourse is, well, we can centralize the execution and we can get to more TPS. And like, okay, sure, you can get there. I'm not disputing your theoretical case of what you want to build. But like, that is not decentralized NASDAQ. Like, part of the system is, yes, get the transactions through and update the state. But there's a second part of it, which is you need to propagate the state to everyone in the world, and you need to make sure that permissionless access for reading all of the information on the state. Like, that is part of a financial market to make it work. And Solana explicitly encodes both of those functions, obviously, into the core protocol. And it is optimizing for those things. And so, like, your original question was, well, what is the EF doing? And my answer is they're optimizing for the wrong thing, or as I would say more bluntly, they have the wrong set of values.
On the values topic, I just finished watching Vitalik and Ethereum story. And I know we talked before the show, you haven't seen it yet, but it was really interesting. There's this like push and pull between idealism and financialism that when you watch the movie is like very on display. Like the EF tries to be very idealistic. And I think that was important from getting like Vitalik to have that vision to get blockchains from 0 to 1. But it seems like they've sort of become out of touch and are trying to push back on blockchains being financial primitives. And my biggest takeaway from the movie is that the EF has become just very woke. It just feels like a very woke organization and how they're like managing who their stakeholders are and who they're trying to provide value for, to your point.
Yeah, I haven't watched the movie, and I'm obviously not close to the EF, because certainly no one in the EF wants to talk to me, given my public stance.
They should want to talk to you, but
yeah. Look, I mean, it's debatable if they should or should not. I can tell you as a matter of statement, no one in the EF has ever contacted me to have meaningful discourse about these kinds of issues. I'm not here to call them woke or not. Again, I think like getting into the broader woke terminology is probably beyond the scope of this podcast. But I do think what you're saying probably ties back to what we were just saying a couple of minutes ago, which is just who are you optimizing for? And the EF has a set of constituents they're optimizing for. And I believe that's the wrong set of constituents. Like that is a value statement that optimizing for at-home validation is explicitly wrong. And they don't believe that. And I do. And I guess 99% of the people who listen to this podcast would agree with me.
Yeah. So going back to the whole SOL ETH argument, I think your main argument is that a chain should be valued based off of its MEV, because that's kind of the cash flows of that chain. And the problem with ETH is that, all the MEV is going to L2s, not ETH, and therefore SOL will eventually flip ETH. Can you kind of expand on the whole MEV argument? And, I guess what does the metrics for Solana look like for MEV versus Ethereum?
Yeah. So, I mean, all assets in the world can be you can think of their valuation methodology in one of two frameworks. One is a DCF, and the other is mimetic. And the meme can apply whether it's Beanie Babies, whether it's Bitcoin, whether it's gold, or the third would be consumptive value if it's a commodity. Hey, if you need gas in your car, that's a function of supply and demand for oil and gas and stuff. Those are the three valuation frameworks for everything in the world. The Ethereum people obviously tell you ETH is money, which is implicitly saying ETH is a meme. That's explicitly an argument for mimetic use. I just don't think ETH is even close to being there. And I've thought, well, why do the ETH people say ETH is money? Because to me, it's obviously a very stupid thing to say. And I think the answer is so much of the culture and history of Ethereum is rooted in Bitcoin. And I don't think it's ever fully escaped that. And Bitcoin, obviously from day one was it says peer-to-peer money in the subtitle for the white paper. And obviously a ton of the early discourse of Ethereum was ETH as a currency. And I contrast that with Solana, where Anatoly's been SOL is money. What the fuck are you talking about? He's I'm here to build NASDAQ. Yeah, I think that contrast is pretty stark.
Let's stick on that before getting into the MEV thing, because it's a topic dear to my heart. I know we've our limited interactions on Twitter have generally been around this topic of money and Bitcoin, ETH, and SOL. And you often ask, why this one and not that one? It's either why ETH and not Solana, or you were saying that you don't believe in the Bitcoin thing. You've always said it was kind of nonsense. And I remember reading, years ago, reading your website and your thesis around that. Now you're saying ETH is also nonsense. And I'm a bit surprised to hear you say that Solana also isn't, because even though Anatoly has been very clear that he's not interested in going after this Moneyness, if you look at the people around him that are the big kind of supporters of SOL, they seem to view it as money and have kind of termed it community money at this point. Do you not want SOL to kind of be, or you just expect SOL will inevitably become money because it will be so useful?
The term money here is being abused in a pretty bad way. The litmus test for money is if you go to the coffee shop, what is the price of the coffee denominated in? That is the threshold for money. And any other threshold is you are lying. That is what a normal fucking person understands as money. And so ETH is money is just a fucking stupid statement, because obviously no coffee shop is denominating coffee in ETH or SOL or Bitcoin or anything else. And therefore, all of these assets are investment assets. You can squabble over, are they securities, are they commodities, there's some new asset class, whatever, those are separate questions. But these are investment assets. And I reject the notion of money entirely. Saying that we're going to have money that supersedes the state is again, it's this Bitcoin libertarian thing that was invented in 2009 by the crazy fucking anarchists who got into Bitcoin early. And look, they're entitled to their beliefs. I'm not trying to tell them to shut up even, they can do whatever they want. I'm just telling you, we're at $1 trillion of market cap in this asset class, and you're trying to engage with the real world to get from 1 trillion to 10 trillion. And going to people and saying this is money is it's just obviously stupid, because everyone is no, coffee, I pay for coffee in dollars.
But Kyle, there's the economy that you the physical economy. You're right. That's the country around you, and that's never going to change. Currencies are around the countries, but there's obviously the internet layer, the digital economy, and if you go kind of a little bit too off, you get into the network states, the Balaji stuff. But we don't need to go that far. But just to very simply, there's a lot of transactions that happen internationally on the internet that are not related to euros, pounds, dollars. It's just sort of two people in different countries on the internet trying to transact. And, if it's an NFT or if it's some other digital good, is it not possible to escape that dollarization?
Of course not, because, yeah, you can transact in the digital space, but you're still bounded by physics in the meat space. and you still need food, and you still need a bed, and you still need shelter. And so, sure, I'm not saying you shouldn't spend money and time in virtual space, but you can't escape meat space.
First of all, like gold has, I would argue, a usage as money between central banks. So central banks buy and hold this thing, and when they're doing well, they buy a bunch of it, and when they're doing badly, they sell some back. And in essence, they don't need to sleep, they don't need to eat. They're just central banks. And you could say the same thing about, AI agents potentially. I don't know how much you kind of look into AI agents, but they can very comfortably transact in some like digital currency, right?
Sure, AI agents can, but like AI agents are not sovereign. There's people talking about building sovereign agents. Those don't exist, and they don't certainly matter as a percentage of GDP. Today, to the extent AI agents are spending money, they're spending money on behalf of a person. Mission statement of Stripe is to increase the GDP of the internet. And like 99.9999% of Stripe's volumes are denominated in fiat currencies. So like you can transact digitally using dollars and euros and whatever else. And you can believe in increasing the GDP of the internet.
So are you saying like this is like inevitable, or it's not going to change? Or are you saying this is just a practical reality as far as we can see, so we shouldn't think about a different reality?
Look, there's always edge cases in which governments fail, and like, what does that world look like? And it's like fun to hypothesize about that stuff. But like saying that the system should be optimized for that use case, I think is fucking insane. And like going to the outside world and being like, you should adopt crypto. And by the way, the core tenet of our thing is like the governments are going to fail. It's just like dumb. Like, what are you doing? Now look, if you want to have your nuclear shelter, like go have your nuclear shelter. That's fine. But then going to the rest of the world and saying everyone should have a nuclear shelter, no, it doesn't work.
I mean, it is a little, if you were in China or Russia, right? I mean, you would see the utility in having an escape hatch with crypto, right?
No, but they want dollars. Like, they don't want Bitcoin and euro. Like, dude, they want fucking dollars.
Stable coins.
Yeah. US dollars in 2024 are the best form of money that has ever existed in human history. Because, like, the brand value and because of accessibility. And because of stablecoins, dollars today are more accessible to anyone in the world than they ever have been. I hate the anarchist roots of crypto. I understand why they were necessary. History is path dependent. So like I'm not mad that like that it happened, and I understand why it needed to happen for us to get to where we are. But I'm saying now that we are at $1 trillion and trying to get to 10 trillion, all of that discourse is stupid and counterproductive.
Yeah, no, I actually side with Kyle here. I think one problem that is prominent in the ETH society is I think Kyle called it like Stockholm syndrome, where we've been building on ETH for years. We've been holding ETH for a long time. So the idea that, another chain can flip it is just outrageous. And we kind of keep justifying like why ETH should keep outperforming. And because ETH metrics haven't been that great recently, now we've kind of succumbed to this idea that, ETH is money, like therefore that like it has value. Like, why do you think there is some such Stockholm syndrome in the industry? Do you think it's like bag holder bias? Like what is your view on the entire situation here?
Yeah, it's bag bias. But then if you go one level deeper than that in like just like human psychology, it's hard for people to change their minds. This is like very well known and studied. And it's particularly hard to change people's minds when it's tied to their identity or when it's tied to their income statement or their balance sheet. There's not a new psychological phenomenon happening here that's not already well documented and understood in the human psychology. It's just expressing itself.
So just to like loop back a little bit, because you talked about stable coins and that's the better currency. Obviously, a layer one token has much more ability to avoid censorship, right? Because stable coins, they have an underlying layer, then they also need to get offboarded by someone and they can get blacklisted, versus like a layer one token, which is just literally just a meme. But at the end of the day, you're not relying on anyone to like offboard it. You can just sort of send it around. And now you also touched base on path dependency, and arguably that is the biggest argument for Bitcoin, is that it was the first one, and it kind of had this also like Queen Mary, like Virgin Mary sort of birthed out of someone who doesn't have any public remnants at this point. Is that kind of why you've started, at least I saw some tweets recently that you're like, I don't believe in this Bitcoin bullshit, but I'm not going to fight it right now. Like maybe you guys, that's not going to be my battle today. Is that sort of something that you've decided strategically to not tackle right now, or?
Yeah, fighting Bitcoin right now just doesn't accomplish anything. I'm fairly confident, like 90% plus confidence interval, that when we look back in 20 years and write the history books about how the crypto thing played out, the story will be, we invented Bitcoin. Like, we said it was money, and like no one used it as money. And we said it was a good payment mechanism, and no one used it as a payment mechanism. And then we just started inventing a bunch of other fucking coins. Litecoin, and then obviously ETH, and then obviously ETH, had the ability to do DeFi. We didn't actually know DeFi was the thing for ETH when ETH was invented, but like this emergent thing happened called DeFi. And then the beauty of DeFi was you could just trade more stuff. I mean, you can trade more stuff and you can lever up to trade more stuff. That is a casino. Like, that is the definition of casino, is the ability to make up assets and trade them arbitrarily with leverage. And we built the world's largest and best casino. Very weirdly, Wall Street and Stripe and Visa and all these guys noticed, and they were like, your casino is dumb, but the core technology that's powering your casino is better than the technology that powers all of the other finance and payments. And we'll adopt your technology. And there was like some belief in 2015 era that like it'd be permissioned chains. And like that mostly seems to be dead at this point. And they're actually now adopting public chains. Obviously, we now have, Visa and BlackRock and a bunch of others are doing stuff on public chains. Still very small, but like it has a seed to grow into something much larger. And so, anyways, you can now see that like that's going to be the arc of the story that we look back on 20 years from now. Is we made the casino, we proved that the casino is a better set of technology than old system, and then people who have all of the assets move to the new to the new system. So I think that's going to happen, and that'll be the story. And so then coming back to your original question of like, Bitcoin, is it dumb? Why is it dumb? Well, as of today, we're still in the casino phase. And like any reasonable person who's not in the ecosystem, who looks at the ecosystem from the outside and spends roughly 2 minutes looking at it, the only correct conclusion is that it is a casino. Now you can say there's stablecoins, you can say there's DPIN, and like, yes, there are all these other things. And like, I obviously believe in these other things because I'm a large investor in, most of these things. For a person who is not thinking very hard, who looks at the industry, the correct conclusion is casino. At some point that will change. I think that's not 3 years away. I think that's probably more like 5 or 8 years away. And at some point, a reasonable, normal person will say, crypto, that's the payment system that's way fucking better than all the other payment systems I used. And again, that will different people will come to that conclusion at different points in time based on where they live. Ironically, Americans will be the last ones to come to that conclusion for a bunch of obvious reasons. But people all over the world will come to that conclusion. And once enough people believe that their first order understanding of crypto is not casino, but is payments, then is the time to say Bitcoin is dumb, it should go to zero, and SOL should flip Bitcoin. But we're not there yet. So there's no point in fighting that fight until that moment in time.
And you think like the US dollar stablecoin is going to be the thing that is used for all these payments?
Yes. I will bet any amount of money on any odds to get yes, absolutely.
And these big corporations, like some of our best in the US, like BlackRock, Visa, they're building on Ethereum. You think that's a mistake? They're wrong? They're going to move over to Solana at some point?
Every single entity that matters, like large regulated financial institution, I think 100% of them announced ETH first. And I believe at this point, 100% of them have announced publicly for Solana. BlackRock announced last week at Breakpoint, BUIDL's coming to Solana. Visa a year ago said, we're basically like moving to Solana. And today Visa actually prefers Solana very explicitly to Ethereum. I think of the asset issuer types, their preferences are less strongly held. Solana versus Ethereum, the more you are in payments and like high volume of payments, you don't even have a choice. And actually PayPal, the Breakpoint talk is live. I watched it last night. The guy from PayPal says explicitly on stage publicly, like Ethereum is not useful for what we want to do. It does not support our long-term objectives. Like we are in on Solana, and that is what we believe is going to support our long-term objectives. So yeah, they launched on Ethereum first, but like it's live on Solana, and they're very clear about where they're going.
Let me ask you an interesting one. So, these like postmortems where you sort of imagine that you're wrong or that something happened wrong, and then you think about what caused it. So you said 90%. let's zoom out and say, okay, we're in 2040 and it's that 10%. You kind of missed something or something random happened. Where do you think your blind spot might be? Is it like not understanding like kind of some geopolitical thing or macro or some of these forces? Like which part of your knowledge base and understanding would have failed most likely if in that 10% chance, like, the world kind of ends up different than you expect?
Well, we can tell you with 100% probability that the first 15 years of crypto was just speculation. Like that is unequivocally true. And then, so the question is, well, like, how does the story change away from that? And I'm actually not being prescriptive as to how it's going to change, other than to say it will change. And all of us are here because we all believe it will change. I don't really, I mean, the way I'm wrong is that it doesn't change. And so like, what are the reasons it doesn't change and it only stays a casino? The obvious one would be governments basically say it's illegal and you can't use it for regulated financial services. In which case then it just stays in this corner of society and is just a casino.
How about like the AI thing? Is there something that could change drastically in terms of how the world functions based on, ChatGPT number 7?
The only like theoretical argument I've seen that would support that is that like, we get HEI and then we have like utopia and money no longer matters because like resources are so abundant in the world because the AI is doing everything. In that world is money. There's so much abundance in the world that like, I mean, what is money? Money is explicitly scarcity. They're saying I have more money than you, or you have more money than me, and I can therefore acquire more goods or services than you, or vice versa. And so like the way like that AI doesn't make that concept irrelevant until you get to the threshold of AI produces so much abundance that there is no longer any notion of scarcity at all. I'm not really worried about that, way the world plays out. And if it does, then like everyone is so high quality of life that like, who cares?
It's
money no longer matters by definition in that configuration.
It's interesting to me that your thesis is like around money and scarcity, but there's also no like, heart and appreciation for the fact that, right, like Bitcoin is a scarce asset. Governments can't just print it. It sounds to me like you're just really not concerned about governments. Is it true that you're not concerned about governments overspending and Bitcoin is like a safe haven, or is your safe haven the S&P 500, ETFs? Is it gold? Is it crypto?
Multi-pronged answer. There are two kinds of assets in the world: economically productive assets and economically unproductive assets. And Bitcoin is economically unproductive and always will be. And I don't see a reason to hold an economically unproductive asset. You can choose to go, if you think the US government's bad, you can buy equities in other countries, whatever, you can buy S&P 500. There's lots of assets that are naturally inflation resistant. You can get there's plenty of ways to fight inflation while still being economically productive. I just don't see a reason to own an economically unproductive asset. Full stop. And so that means gold is excluded, Bitcoin is excluded. The second part of your question then is like, you don't give like preference to Bitcoin in the crypto space. And like, again, coming back to the theory I just laid out, like what I think the 20-year story is going to be of crypto. I believe when we are in the state of the world in which normal people say, oh, crypto, it's the thing that's the payment system that moves all the money around in the world. And when we are not in that world today, obviously, and we're not even close to that world. But when we are in that world, then the question is, well, which platform do you believe is going to be powering most of those transactions? And I believe today the highest probability answer is Solana. It was Ethereum for a long time. Today, I believe the higher probability case is Solana. And if you believe that Solana is going to be the one that powers most of that stuff, then it's just kind of natural that people will buy some SOL inevitably and talk about it. And then at some point in 5, 6, 7, 8 years, people will say, Bitcoin pet rock, 21 million, great, economically unproductive. I don't do anything with it. It looks kind of like Solana. Public key cryptography, permissionless consensus. The address is a bunch of fucking random letters and numbers that like are not human readable. They're both called cryptocurrencies. And they kind of, like on the surface, they kind of look similar. Obviously, there's a lot of mechanical differences. This one powers all of the stuff in the world, and this one sits here and does nothing. Why would I own the one that sits here and does nothing? And like, again, you can like get into like, 21 million and like it's harder to change. And like, yeah, like you can get into like the long tail edge cases around supply schedule stuff. And like those claims about Bitcoin are accurate. Like I'm not saying that Solana has any of those properties, offers any of those properties stronger than Bitcoin does. Definitively, it does not, and it will not, even in the state of the world I am theoretically describing in 8 years. However, what I would argue is optimizing for the ninth nine of certainty around the supply schedule is just irrelevant. Like if you only have 2 nines of certainty around supply schedule and not 9 nines, it just doesn't matter.
But how about the concept of neutrality? This is like one that doesn't get talked about a lot or enough. But you look at something like Bitcoin, it's owned by East, West, Russia, China. Everyone's mining it, Middle East. It's kind of spread out. Everyone's financial institutions. You look at Solana, like obviously Multicoin, a bunch of US funds, Silicon Valley's deep in it. You got Chamath making jokes about dumping $1 billion of it, or, oh, I'm not going to do it. Oh, maybe I will. Oh, I don't know. Like that concept has to surely have some value, right? The concept of like a neutrality across the world.
I mean, there's a lot of elements to neutrality. Neutrality is a fairly, it's like obviously important, and we all understand it means a lot of different things in a lot of different contexts. But there's no one dimension of neutrality that is like the only dimension. You just alluded to one salient dimension, which would be like distribution of ownership. And of all the major crypto assets, Bitcoin is, I think, the most distributed. I assume that's the case. I don't actually know what the data says, but I think that's fairly intuitive. And let's just take it for granted for now. I don't think that I don't think that's the vector of neutrality that matters the most. I think the vector that matters the most is actually not neutrality, it's utility. This comes back to basically what I was just saying a couple minutes ago, which is if we're in the state of the world 8 years from now, in which Solana is powering all this economic activity and stuff is happening, then more people will own it in that scenario. And like, if people are like, there's Bitcoin, which is economically unproductive and economically useless. And like, yeah, there's some set of ideologues in the world who own it. Maybe it's 500 million. I don't know. But like, if the theory is, well, Solana is powering economic activity for 4 billion people, then like, obviously that's more than 500 million people by definition. And so like in that world, like which one's more neutral? Right. So you're talking about the world today, and like, yes, today, right, obviously Bitcoin is more neutral. I don't dispute that at all. But that's not the relevant case to optimize, or that's not the relevant future state to discount back.
Can you get to 4 billion people when the powers in the East, let's say like the Asian powers, are quite incentivized to be more aggressive on something like Solana, where it's like, well, none of the people that I know over here in my country own this thing, so like we're gonna push people against it, or like not give it as much access.
I think the probability that governments meaningfully single out Solana and not Bitcoin is extremely low. To the extent that governments are going to actively attack these things, and we obviously see this most prominently in China today, it's just universal against all assets. They're not discriminating. I think the configuration in which Solana is the target of governments and Bitcoin is not, it doesn't even make sense to me. Also, like Bitcoin is the largest one. So that's also like the weird part of that. It's like, well, why would you target number 4 and not number 1? It's just kind of stupid.
Yeah,
I think it's just to like answer on that. It's more like around incentives alignment. That's something that I believe in very strongly. And if some Middle Eastern country has been mining Bitcoin and suddenly has billions of it, they're not gonna prevent their citizens from adopting it. If they don't have any, then it's a different equation.
I mean, you could just go buy it on the open market versus mining it. No sovereign, to the extent sovereigns have been mining Bitcoin, it's like not more than the last few years. Like it just wasn't happening in 2017. Just how much Bitcoin has been mined, it's just like not that much money in an aggregate scale. Just these are irrelevant numbers.
Yeah, I think Kyle's argument is that he wants to own economically productive assets, and one contrarian take that I heard you in another podcast say is that all the value is in the execution, right? Because that's where the MEV is.
It's actually in the sequencing. It's in the sequencing.
Right. So getting to that, I think you said that you're more bullish L2s relative to ETH. So do you think there's a world in which there's like a power law effect and there's like one single L2 that services all the users and that L2 becomes very, very valuable? Do you think there is a world in which L2s are like where all the economic activity will lie and the L2 token becomes valuable?
Yes, and I think there's like a few fairly obvious follow-on steps from that, because that's not the equilibrium end state. the equilibrium event state at that point is, oh, you just become your own L1. Like,
Right.
that's that's my core problem with all of this. There's no world in which Arbitrum is powering $200 billion of TVL and $50 billion of on-chain trading volume and is subservient to Ethereum.
Yeah.
Like that configuration is not possible.
I strongly agree with that, and something that I pointed out in that piece 2 years ago, and is obvious to me that's that's true. Another maybe like different take on your MEV thesis, though, is that application layer is increasingly figuring out how to get MEV, and ultimately, like, the long-term goal is to give the MEV to the users, not to keep it for the chain or for anyone validating. It's just give it back. What's your thought about that?
Yeah, people misconstrue my statement. So I've never said I want there to be more MEV. MEV is theft from users. What my view is you can't get rid of all MEV, and some of it will accrue to the chain, and that is a basis for valuing the chain as an economically productive investment asset. A larger percentage of MEV will flow back to users and to applications, without question. That will be the case, and that's great. But there's large classes of MEV that I believe will always flow to stakers. The most obvious of which is Sexed XARB, and that is probably the largest source of MEV in aggregate, because obviously there's just so many trading venues for all of this shit, and prices are volatile, and so there will always be Sexed XARB. And that's great.
There will always be, but is that really going to be trillions of dollars?
I mean, look at what's the amount of assets trading across all of trading venues around the world per day. Or actually, the better proxy for that statement is, what are the total profits of all HFT firms? Is like probably like the crudest way to reason about that TAM today.
For all assets?
Yeah, for all HFT firms around the world. Yeah. I don't know the answer to that, and obviously a lot of that information is private. I'm going to guess it's on the order of 100 billion per year. I don't think it's a trillion per year. I think that's too high. 10 billion per year is obviously way too low.
I think we kind of know it's sort of like in the 60 to 70 range based on Citadel Securities and some of like the big firms that report. So it's probably 60, I would say. So your point is like that's all going to accrue because all the markets of the world are going to go on chain.
Yeah, and then obviously we're also inventing lots of new markets. I mean, we have meme coins, you have DPIN tokens, you got all these fucking gaming assets, whatever. It's also market expansionary. I'm just saying as like a like baseline crude proxy for what is the profit pool. You could just look at HFT profits today, and then obviously this is a market expansionary, clearly.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but like your overall thesis is that the meme value when you started, you kind of presented the three values, and one of them was the meme value. You're expecting that to sort of asymptotically head to zero for all assets, including Bitcoin.
Look, there will always be new meme coins, and like people will have fun with them, like clearly. But the ability to sustain $1 trillion of market cap in a meme asset, I don't think is tenable.
So what's your take around? We've seen some talk in some Twitter chatter. Maybe we can bring up some of your tweets. There was one around Berachain. You wanted to bet $1 million, I think, with Vance on SOL chart. Vance from Framework says that the SOL chart will haunt the dreams of many a manlet, and you wanted to bet $1 million. What exactly is sort of driving your strong belief in the ability for SOL to withstand an onslaught from some new chain? Or is it specifically about Bera? Is it like a specific belief about Berachain, or could you just replace that with any of the new chains like Monad or whatever, and you would still have the same response?
Would have the same response generically, but it's probably more idiosyncratically pointed at Bera. I don't know a lot about Berachain ecosystem, but I know a handful of things. One is they're really fucking slow, and slowness is usually a very good symptom of deeper problems. I can't tell you what the underlying causes of slowness are, but like, they've been working on Berachain for 18 months now, maybe 24. It's been a while. They haven't shipped mainnet, and like, it's a fucking EVM fork. Something is wrong.
But the parties are great. I mean, you got to give them that.
The ship push.
Sure, fine, cool, fine. I'm not disputing that claim at all. Go for it. I'm just telling you, like, something is wrong.
But my concern with your bet is, there's this 18-month parameter. And in this short term, and short term is like 1-2 years, price seems to be driven by all kinds of random things. I mean, look at the assets that are outperforming. Like we're seeing Shiba Inu be like the highest performer out of the top 50, this month. Are you not worried about the, let's call it the excitable masses?
No.
Yeah. I want to ask you about your ability to say disconnect from the masses and what the masses are saying. So I feel comfortable saying this now because you've obviously done very well. Your firm's very successful, but 2022 was a bad year for you, right? I'm sure there were some tough times there. FTX collapsed, obviously. Solana went down to sub $10. You held a lot through Multicoin. Can you just talk about what that experience was like? I remember reading a letter that you had put out, basically that you were still convicted on SOL, still holding SOL. What was that experience like? I mean, was your core belief in the product ever shaken? Was it depressing? Like, how did you push through that time and have the conviction to hold through it?
2022 sucked. It was funny for us. We had the greatest 2021 you can imagine.
Yeah.
We had about as bad as 2022 as you can imagine. It was just generally a miserable, awful time. We had a lot of discussions about Solana, and the biggest risk to Solana was that history is path dependent, and too many other people get scared and shaken out, and the ecosystem basically falls apart. And that was a very real risk. I don't really know. We had no ability to like put a percentage probability on that happening. Like you could have argued it's 10%, you could have argued it's 50%. There's no like even remotely objective way to try and assess that probability. And obviously it's like evolving in real time, and like one defection can cause a cascade of other defections. So like there's like a tremendous number of amount of path dependency on like a very short time horizon involved in all of this. So the probability that, I would say prior to FTX collapsing, the probability of the ecosystem falling apart was effectively zero. Because like there was just clearly like a good functioning ecosystem, and like no one was worried about falling apart. And after FTX collapsed, clearly that probability increased from zero to some non-zero probability.
Mm-hmm.
We never felt it was like an 80% probability. Like we never thought it was like the overwhelming probability was that it was going to fall apart. But we assigned a non-zero probability. And so, as a risk reward at that point, we said, okay, well, the core thesis around gas and latency and user experience, all those other things were unchanged, obviously. And we just had this new variable enter the fray of like, hey, this is basically the ecosystem fall apart because of this weird bad thing happened. And we concluded that the risk reward was favorable to hold. And so we did.
2 quick follow-ups on that. I'm actually not sure. Did you double down around that time on your SOL thesis by maybe acquiring more SOL, investing more in the ecosystem, etc.? And then the second follow-up is, what advice do you have for people that are probably going to go through this in the future in the crypto space, whether they're builders, whether they're investors that are down that bad? Like, how do you push through it, maintain, keep a good head on your shoulders and double down on the things that you think are going to work in the future?
So our hedge fund, the mandate of our hedge fund is to be fully deployed at all times. So it was 100% long going into FTX, was 100% long. So like there was no free dollars there to buy more SOL. We did in the months after the FTX collapse bridge a lot of Solana ecosystem companies. I won't name specific names other than to tell you it was quite a few. So like we did double down on the bet via that mechanism, not via like market buying SOL at $10. And then the second part of your question is like advice for future people. I don't know. Very hard to. I'm generally not a fan of general advice because things are context specific, and you should make decisions based on contextual information. And the context of what we're talking about now was extremely specific and extremely weird. And I probably wouldn't try and generalize decision making from that period to other periods.
That is a great answer.
Yeah, just curious. Before we get to pasta, can I just ask a quick question on the election and Kyle's like recent political stuff?
Sure.
So yeah, recently you tweeted out that you were matching donations to a super PAC backing conservative movements. It was a conservative super PAC. The election right now, 49-51, basically 50-50. It's been going back and forth for the last couple months. How much do you think this matters for crypto? Who wins?
A lot is the one-word answer. The more nuanced answer is crypto maps to the general. Crypto is very libertarian by definition. I mean, the notion of self-custody is like very libertarian. And libertarianism maps much better to Republican ideals than to Democratic ideals. And so like, it's just like, forget about even the current political landscape of Harris and Trump. crypto obviously maps to Republicans better than it does to Democrats. Not to say that there can't be Democrats who like crypto. I'm just saying, like, as a very backdrop statement, it maps better to Republicans. So that's comment A. Comment B, there is at least one extremely high-profile person in the Democratic Party who hates crypto, and that person is Elizabeth Warren. And she has made it very clear that she does not believe in libertarian ideals and that she believes in centralized control of the financial system. And she also is the most powerful person in the United States today as it pertains to financial regulation. And she hates crypto. That's comment 2. Comment 3, under a theoretical Harris administration, it is unclear if Elizabeth Warren will have the same degree of influence and power as she has had under a Biden administration. We cannot know the answer to that question. However, I think the only correct assumption is that you should assume that it stays roughly the same, because there's not an obvious reason for it to be meaningfully better. Now, if Harris had a strong background in finance and like had been a New York prosecutor, for example, in Southern District of New York, and had made lots of statements over the last 30 years of her public career about finance, then I think you could probably make stronger intuitions about what she will prefer in her administration as it pertains to financial regulation. She is not. The overwhelming majority of her life as a district attorney was focused on like violent crime and like family crime and orphanages and like stuff and drugs and stuff like that, but like not financial crime and like not financial services. So she has effectively no public statements at all in her 30 years career about financial services or statements. So I think the correct conclusion from that is it's just not an issue she actually cares about. And so my assumption is that the status quo will perpetuate in a Harris administration. And Elizabeth Warren definitively hates crypto. She tells us that. I mean, she literally has a fucking banner she put out there saying, "Help me fight build the anti-crypto army." You know, like, so all of this stuff of like reading the tea leaves of like, oh my God, Harris said a nice thing about blockchain yesterday. It's just like, dude, like, what are you saying? You know, I'll leave it at that.
Kyle, it's been quite a treat having you, and we've touched all kinds of topics. So thank you for diving into everything with us. I think, while we don't agree on everything, it's all thought out, and I think the viewers can kind of understand where all the differences are coming from. So that's the most useful discussion. Let's lighten up and go to a bit of a pasta of the week. I think you're gonna have one as well, but maybe Taiki, you can kick off.
Yeah, so as Cal said earlier, in the first 15 years of crypto, crypto has been a casino. And as a result of the casino, we have a lot of degens struggling out there. So I thought this meme was really funny. Justin, if you can pull it up, where it's like this triple Venn diagram of, I guess, like what crypto really is. You know, losing money, dopamine addiction, health decline, and crypto is at the center of this. I personally identify with at casino on cocaine because I consistently lose money holding ETH, and my health is declining with the increased stress and lack of sleep. I was wondering, you know, with the 4 people here, like, what do you identify here? Where do you identify here in terms of like this triple Venn diagram? Like, Jody, how about you go first?
Cocaine.
Cocaine. Okay.
I'm not losing money, thankfully, but I do feel like there's the dopamine issue.
How about you, Justin?
Yeah, somewhere in the dopamine field. I don't think it's well, maybe losing money with ETH. That could be the casino bucket there. Losing money, dopamine addiction.
How about you, Kyle?
Kyle, you're looking pretty healthy. I think you're avoiding the health decline.
Healthy and wealthy and wise too.
I can't say I've been losing money recently, and I can't say my health has been declining. I will say that I definitely did not take care of myself from 2017 through 2022 or thereabouts, and have started in the last year and a half, 2 years, to prioritize my health more substantially. I've lost a bunch of weight, and it's been a very good experience. So I'm going to say, but dopamine addiction, I mean, anyone who looks at my Twitter, I fucking love Twitter. So I think I'm pretty squarely in the upper right corner of your Venn diagram.
Great,
awesome.
Great. Awesome.
Well, can, since you love Twitter, can we get your pasta as well, Kyle?
Sure. I think there was this meme that went around. This one. Yeah, I saw this like this morning or yesterday from Bennington, and I read this and I just laughed. I mean, I don't know if Ben still works for Ethereum or for Consensus. I know he was like clearly involved in core Ethereum for a while, maybe still is. But I just saw this and I was like, the pretense of this tweet is I am being selfless because there are so many other people in the world who like also don't have good internet, who also want to validate Ethereum blocks. But in fact, I read this and I concluded the exact opposite is the most selfish thing you could possibly say, which is Ethereum should be designed around me. And I just fucking laughed.
So he's basically saying that he's running a home staking rig, does not use MEV boost, is running on like janky internet, and he's concerned. Basically,
he's concerned about Ethereum, and I just looked at this as just him. Like one interpretation is incredibly selfless, another interpretation is incredibly selfish, and you can choose where you want to net out on that interpretation.
Two sides of the coin.
Yeah.
And this is another one you liked. I think we love lemmings, and we just see lemmings all the time in crypto. So they're jumping off the cliff, and they're all glad. They're all saying that I'm glad we're all aligned. This one spoke to you as well.
Yeah, I mean, I thought this was perfect. Like, and I really do think this captures Ethereum because, look, most people are not engineers, and a lot of people own ETH who are not engineers, and most people are like less inclined to develop strong views. Like I know I'm more inclined to develop stronger views than other people. And so if you've just been like an ETH holder for the last 7 years, it's like fairly intuitive for you to like, I don't know, okay, Vitalik and the EF said this, so I guess I'm going to go along with it. Like, and I understand why that happens. And then you see this ETH alignment, then you see restaking, and you're like, oh, L2s are good for ETH. And I just like, it just so perfectly captures like the state of, and like alignment really is the perfect word there. Because like I would argue that both EigenLayer and L2s are not aligned with Ethereum. But like I can see why on the surface you could make that claim.
That's definitely a meme. It can apply to so many things in crypto. Like you said, I think everybody can find uses. Justin, how about you?
Yeah, so like I alluded to at the start of the show, I'm on a little bit of an investigation into why the EF and like so much of the Ethereum ecosystem is so woke these days, and like where that's coming from. And I think this tweet, Eric really went after Hayden here. So Hayden says, Kamala just said she will encourage innovative technologies like digital assets in all caps. And Eric just responds, she's literally suing you, LOL. And I just thought this was like the perfect encapsulation of like what is wrong with the Ethereum space right now. Like, why do we have this cognitive dissonance? Why can't we just admit and like what we're seeing is what's happening, right? It is clear to me, like Kyle had pointed out, that conservatives and Republicans are much more crypto aligned. And Hayden is literally being sued by the current administration and still trying to find any way possible to justify and support what we're seeing on the left. It's just quite shocking to me.
I mean, this tells you that like Hayden is obviously a diehard Democrat. I don't know anything about Hayden or his political beliefs or his family or anything, but like the only interpretation of this tweet is he is a fucking diehard Democrat and is looking for reasons to like not hate Harris given his job. And 99% of evidence says A, and then he's like, well, I'm going to look at the 1% and say, oh, therefore this is just like, like the degree of loyalty to the party is pretty profound.
Well, let me round up the pastas. I have one from Gort, my favorite. It's some days old, but I thought it was so good and so relevant to a discussion on money that I had to play it. So I'll read it quickly. He says, I just saw a homeless man with a sign that said anything helps. So I asked him if I could send him some ETH, and he said, what? ETH isn't money. Why would I want that? And I said, well, first of all, you're wrong. And second of all, you said anything helps. And I gave him Argentine pesos. And he says, what am I going to do with this? And I said, well, I have conveyed to you an important lesson today, so I will send you some USD.
Oh, no, he died.
Right at the punchline.
I know.
So we lost Jordy due to technical difficulties. I think he's lost his battery. His battery died, and it's super late there. I'll just try to continue where Jordy left off. And I see now that you have conveyed a very important lesson to you today, so I will send you some USDC and optimism. And he pulled out a brand new iPhone 16, downloaded a mobile wallet, and I sent him $10, and he said, great, I'll send this to an exchange and put it in a bank account. And then he realized he didn't have enough for transaction fees, which needed to be paid in ETH because ETH is money. And I let that sink in for a moment. And then I realized he had a bank account. So I asked how he has a bank account. And he told me he wasn't actually homeless. He just stands outside with a sign that says anything helps. It's not illegal to do that. Anyone can hold up a sign that says anything helps. This is how the properties of money emerge. I really like Jordy's pasta here because I think it like goes at what we've been talking about for this whole entire episode, that like the Ethereum ecosystem is just so hard and complex to understand. Like you have to navigate all of these different chains and L2s. And I just think he hit the mark here.
Yeah, I mean, this perfectly highlights the fact that ETH is not money. It's just great.
ETH is not money. So thank you, Kyle, for coming on site, lads. Like, do you have any final words for our listeners that they can take away from this episode?
Yeah, I'd say like, think about the state of crypto in 5 or 8 years, and what do you think that world looks like? Is that a world of, thousands of L2s and everything magically works? If you do believe that, then like be clear about what technology and product risk are you underwriting between here and there versus just like a simpler thing like 1L1. I think that's probably my most important thing I would tell people is like, I don't see the evidence to support the theory that 1,000 L2s magically work together. Not to say that it's impossible, but just the evidence doesn't support that theory. And I think that is underappreciated.
Yeah, it's like this theory of like inversion, right? Where it's like, if crypto wins in 10 years, then what? Like, how do we get there? And the current ETH roadmap doesn't really make sense.
Going to the outside world and being like, there's 10 different Ethereums. And you're like, what do you mean? They're like, well, there's Optimism ETH and Base ETH and Arbitrum ETH and Scroll. It's just like, wait, what the fuck are you saying? Like, you know?
Well, thank you so much, Kyle. It's been an absolute pleasure. We've wanted to talk to you for a long time. I'm glad we finally had the chance. Thank you for doing this. And we hope to have you on soon. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. It was awesome to come on.
Hey, guys, I'm back. My my battery's working. I'm in a different country, so just a splash. Justin, I hope you managed to read my pasta and not brutalize it, because I know I didn't manage to finish it. Okay.
My pasta delivery hasn't been the best. I think I kind of fumbled that one for you.
If I don't win pasta of the week, it's because of you, Justin. So I blame you. I blame you. Guys, I mean, we do want to recap a little bit. Like we said, we have a couple minutes here just to give our thoughts, because it was a very productive discussion. Justin, like, what were some of your conclusions?
Yeah, so I mean, clearly Kyle does an amazing job articulating the bull case for Solana, and I find myself resonating with a ton of his points. I do think he sort of misses the mark on a couple key things that we're going to talk about. But for me personally, it's not even moneyness. It's not about MEV. It's none of those things. It's actually the decentralization component and the credible neutrality. So some of the interesting things that came out of Token 2049, Snowden had this, big talk he did, and he talked about Solana and called it centralized and basically said it was just a chain for meme coins. Well, I think that's like a bit of a stretch. I do think there's like a big point that Snowden has here. I think clearly Solana is not as decentralized as Ethereum. If we talk about who can run validators, who can run nodes, how easy it is to contribute to the ecosystem. And then even on top of that, right, Ethereum's just been around a lot longer and has more Lindy and really has this like public blockchain feel. Just today, Visa announced that they're going to be helping banks tokenize assets. They're building on what they call the Ethereum public blockchain. That's what they said in their official marketing materials. And I think that sort of like hits at the core of what the Ethereum community has been rallying for with this decentralized component. Ethereum really has nailed that. They've like optimized for that completely. And like, if you take this to the limit, like, it does seem to me that a company like Visa is more likely to use Ethereum because it truly is neutral. Whereas Solana still feels like a company. It feels like a corporation. There's a core team, a core company behind the development. There's a small amount of validators contributing to the network.
How about the NASDAQ idea, this like decentralized NASDAQ that seems to be like on Kyle's mind?
So I think that would clearly show, like, I don't think that would provide as much value as we think. I think Evan here had like a really interesting tweet. So Kyle, he quote tweeted Kyle, which Kyle said the North Star is to be decentralized NASDAQ. And then Evan compared the market cap of NASDAQ, which is $42 billion as of September 21st, to Solana, which is an $86 billion FDV. So clearly there's some premium being paid, whether that's to moneyness, whether that's to it being blockchain technology, etc. It's not, in my opinion, the North Star that Solana is just decentralized NASDAQ. There has to be something more.
Okay. And how about you, Taiki? What stood out for you?
Yeah, and I think the point where I had like question marks internally was when Kyle said that, moneyness is a meme and, Bitcoin's not going to be worth anything at some point in the future. ETH is not money. And if that's not the case, if nothing is money, then you have to value something based off of cash flows or revenues or transaction fees. And in the Token 2049 pitch, Kyle said that, Solana is going to flip Ethereum because, ETH is leaking MEV to L2s, whereas Solana is capturing it, and that's considered cash flows. I think the concept of money is still a widely debated topic. I think one of the ETH devs on Twitter said that, we never intended ETH to be money. When I talked to Vitalik in Singapore, He never said that he wanted ETH to be money, or he never intended it for it to be money. But if the community wanted it to be money, then it could be money.
That's such a bit to say. It's like, well, I mean, if you want it to be like, okay, but
Jordy, I thought you pushed back on Kyle the best in this during the actual episode itself. You said like Kyle's talking about this physical world, buying coffee with dollars, but really like look at the on-chain economy, the digital economy. Ethereum is used on all of these L2s as the base money, and I think that does count for something.
Absolutely. I mean, first, I've been trolling Kyle for years on Twitter about like the thesis of like Bitcoin's worthless and all this stuff is it was a treat for me to finally have a one-to-one discussion. I actually like the guy a lot more. Like now that I've spoken with him, I understand where he's coming from. I fundamentally disagree with some of his assumptions. The one that stood out clearly to me was he thinks the reason why none of this moneyness matters is because the US dollar is just such a much better form and will remain a better form of money that like none of this stuff can compete, because the US dollar, that's like never gonna change. And he seemed very confident about it. We diverge massively on that assumption, and like the users can kind of, choose a side based on how they look at this US dollar. For me, the macro considerations and how it plays out over the next, many years, I think we've seen many times in history where currencies collapse or change, or, dynamics change geopolitically. And I think we're at a precipice where the national debt is large enough where we're increasing rates, and somehow that causes more inflation, because like just the amount of servicing of the debt increases as well. So I think we are at a critical point. US dollar thing, completely different. And I did get a chance to push back on him on MEV, which he's gone on multiple other podcasts. And because he's not talking to traders, especially high frequency traders like I am. Like MEV is a high frequency trading concept, and it's something that I'm very familiar with. I pushed back saying that applications would abstract this, give it back to the users, and it would not go to the chain. He actually agreed. He just agreed, and he thought that there would still be enough left over. But when we would try to put some numbers on it, how much Citadel and whatever, there's not that much once you give it back to the user. So I thought that MEV argument was quite weakened, and I'm not sure what the users of Solana think in terms of future MEV flows, but I was less convinced. However, so happy that we found the base of the arguments.
I do think where Kyle's arguments like really hit a home run, and he really nails it on like who we're building for. And so I think like the biggest point I took away from Kyle that actually pushed me more towards the Solana camp was this idea that Solana is better for users, just for everyday people, and for builders. Like builders don't need to worry about what L2 to go to or like what EVM to go to. They just use Solana. And users just onboard to Solana. They don't have to worry about L2s, bridging, all of this crazy stuff that maybe gets obfuscated away in the future, but doesn't today. And for me, like that's the argument I love that Kyle brought to the table. Solana's building for where users are today, which I thought was pretty powerful.
You're absolutely right. And he's very stubborn in his beliefs, but you have to be stubborn if you're going to hold through like what he said, like a 95% drawdown and just like run it all the way back. And, like go through this process of decentralizing what is clearly like initially a very centralized chain, and it's getting there, and you need like that kind of stubbornness. And like I said, I think it was a very valuable discussion. Hope our listeners enjoyed it, and we'll see you guys next week, hopefully for another good discussion. Take care.